Hey everyone, back and trying to connect to what we were just talking about um, Henry VIII, who felt betrayed by the Pope because the Pope decided that he was not going to grant the annulment of of Henry's with Catherine of Aragon because that bond between Spain and England was too important. Um, Henry is enraged by this and decides that he is going to leave the church and begin the Church of England, the Anglican Church. And those who refused, like his local bishop, John Fisher, and his lawyer, Thomas More, were pretty famous martyrs because of that. And just to kind of close up the idea of the Reformation, there were lots of groups that arose in protest to the Pope at this time and developed into other Christian religious denominations. Too many to really kind of go through today. I wanted to address a little bit of the church in the New World. How did the Christian church come to America? I wanted to speak specifically about two major ways and the earliest um, colonizations. You had two major superpowers. You had Spain and you had France, and they were coming to the New World, and then England eventually. But starting out, you had the Spanish missionaries coming with Spain, and they were primarily Franciscans. And then you had the Jesuits coming with the French up toward Canada. That's primarily where they entered the colonization process. So the Spanish conquistadors, brought these Franciscans, and what the Franciscans did, and they were very successful. They they came in to these heavily native populations, and they tried to help them with their everyday lives. They tried to build schools for them, and they taught them irrigation techniques and farming techniques. So these Franciscan missionaries, led by the famous Saint Junipero Serra, they colonized all of Mexico and the Southwest, and integrated Christianity into the local superstitions. And you see this. You see the ramifications of this along the West Coast. You have any number of the cities and towns all along the California coast are named after Franciscan saints and other religious terms. You have Saint San Francisco, right? Saint Francis. You have San Diego. You have San Bernardino. You have Sacramento, meaning sacrament. Even Los Angeles, which means Los Angeles, the angels, the place where Francis stayed and where his home base was Saint Mary of the Angels, Saint Santa Maria de los Angeles. So you have Los Angeles actually is one of the earliest colonies there too. So they were very successful because they got along with the natives and they helped them. Now, the Jesuits up in French Canada, they were met with a lot more resistance, partly because they came in just saying, "You must accept Jesus," and here's why: because you're all damned fools, and that didn't go over well with the natives, like the Huron Indians and those folks. Those native peoples were much more warlike, and they didn't take lightly to people just telling them what to do. And so the Jesuits did not meet with as much success. Um, they were often tortured and treated very badly. One story is that they took a Jesuit priest and the natives tied him to a tree. They cut open his gut and took his small intestines and started running around the tree with them while this guy is alive and dying, which must have been pretty terrifying. Now, moving on, you have the Pilgrims and the Puritans, right? These are our religious ancestors of the United States, and we look up to them, and we even have Thanksgiving, and we have this whole holiday for that. But primarily, the Pilgrims were not these bastions of religious freedom. They actually were so outside the margins, such a fringe group in Europe, And Europe was pretty open-minded to if you wanted to worship any way you wanted, you could do that. Just find a place and live. But the Puritans were so committed to causing trouble and telling other people they were wrong. Europe just said, "Go away. Just go away." And so they went to the New World. And so anybody who came into contact with them that was not of their religion, they were exclusionary toward. The true, the true leader of religious freedom in America is our boy William Penn here. He was friends with the King of England, and he owned a very large tract of land in the New World, which we would now known as Pennsylvania. And he was a Quaker, and Quakers were open to all kinds of uh, the freedom of religion. And so he told people that if you want to move to Pennsylvania, you can worship whatever whatever way you want. You just cannot impose yours or or treat other people who think a different way badly. So really, the person who should get the most credit for religious freedom in America is our boy William Penn. Cool. The next and the last slide we have here. So I want to go back to we talked about the 1960s. The church at the Counter Reformation dug in their heels and said, "We are in charge. In order to get to God, you have to come through us." Well, at the Second Vatican Council, um, this is the first time that the church takes a look at all that and says, "I think we need to change that." Right now, at that time in the 1950s, they had complete control, and they had all the power, and they didn't need to give it up. So when John the 23rd, and on January 25th, 1959, announced that there was going to be a new council, the church was like, "Well, why?" Right? Um, and John said that we needed a spiritual renewal. We needed to kind of move into modern times, and they um, they started the Second Vatican Council, and you see a picture here of all of the bishops there to go through, and so long story short, some of the things that were achieved at the Second Vatican Council were instead of the latter model where you had to go through the clergy in order to get to God, they believed that all people were priests in some way, right? There was the ordained priesthood, right? The people who were actually priests in the church. But then there's the priesthood of the faithful, those who were baptized, priest, prophet, and king. And you could achieve God by yourself, um, and um, along with the church, and that was a major step. The church wanted to make God more accessible to people. So instead of everything being done in Latin, everything being done kind of away from the people were now included. Before, the priest could just say mass and the people kind of were just in the back hanging out, trading prayer cards and saying the rosary. But now in this modern world, modern setting, the people had there was back and forth between at the liturgy, where the priest would say something and the people would respond. That give and take, the people were actually necessary to the sacraments happening. And this was a major modernization. So it included the laity, the everyday person, as essential to church worship. They used the vernacular language, so the language of the people, right? It wasn't just Latin anymore. People um, people used English or they used Spanish or whatever language they were used to. And lastly, the church, instead of this long drawn out church structure, now it's kind of more circular. Bring people in, bring people close. So that's a major change, and it's pretty impressive that you have a church that had all the control, all the power. Give that power up, give it back to the people. And one of the when people ask me, "Do you ever see God present in the church?" This is one of the things that I point to, because human beings don't give up power on their own. That's not our tendency, and that's the church history.